I was old enough to know the difference between protecting a child and protecting a reputation. I still chose the reputation. I'm 82 now, and my voice sounds calm only because I practiced it. Family disasters don't always arrive with shouting. Sometimes they arrive with dust and an old photograph. My granddaughter Lily sat at my kitchen table flipping through albums. She stopped on a picture of my sister Marjorie, young, laughing, and asked why her father didn't have baby photos with Aunt Marjorie the way she did. Then my son Daniel walked in, saw the page, and the air changed. His eyes went to Marjorie's face, and he looked like a man who had just found a familiar outline in the dark. I gave Lily a smooth excuse. Daniel didn't accept it. He touched the corner of the photo like it could hurt him. Then he looked past me, as if the room contained a memory he couldn't name. I have lived long enough to recognize that look. It is what happens when your body knows something your mind has been trained to ignore. That was the moment the lie stopped belonging to me. Daniel has never been dramatic. He builds his life in straight lines and expects truth to behave the same way. When suspicion settles into him, it doesn't leave. After Lily went outside, Daniel asked where the albums came from. I said, "The closet." He nodded, but his mouth stayed tight. He didn't argue with me then. He did something worse. He started moving through the house with quiet purpose, opening doors and drawers, not like a thief, but like a man checking whether his own foundation is cracked. I heard the soft scrape of cardboard boxes shifting, the dull thud of papers set down, the careful silence between. Later, he returned with a folder of documents and didn't sit down. "There's something strange about my records," he said. He laid them out, a birth certificate copy, a baptism record, a hospital form. Seeing them together made my stomach go cold. I'd relied on time to blur things. Time wasn't blurring anything. "The birth certificate," he said, tapping it once, "looks handled, like someone tried to clean up ink that didn't belong." I kept my face still. I had learned that if you don't flinch, people doubt their own eyes. "Why are there corrections?" he asked. "Why does Marjorie's name show up as a contact? And why did you always say the original was lost?" I told him the old story about the fire, how paperwork went missing, how offices reissued copies, how nothing was anyone's fault. It was a familiar script. I watched him listen without relaxing. I used my oldest defense. "You're overthinking." His eyes lifted, wounded and steady. "I'm not trying to hurt you," he said. "I'm trying to understand why I don't feel like I belong to my own story." That sentence should have forced the truth out of me. Instead, I softened my voice and turned fragile on purpose. "Don't do this," I said. "Not now." He watched me for a long moment, then nodded once. "If you won't tell me," he said, "I'll find out." When the door closed behind him, I called Marjorie. One question had become a hunt. Marjorie arrived after dusk, coat still buttoned, hair pinned. Grief never made her messy. Grief made her precise. She didn't ask how I was. "What did he see?" she asked. "The papers. The albums." Her face flickered. Hurt. Then fear. Then resignation. "He called me," she said. "He asked about the day he was born." "What did you tell him?" "The truth that fits inside the lie," she said. "That I was there. That I loved him. Even now, saying Daniel's name feels like touching a bruise. He has always been mine in habit and hers in ache. All his life, he has treated Marjorie like an extra oxygen tank, someone he could breathe around. I encouraged it when it made me look generous. I resented it when it reminded me what I'd taken. Marjorie opened my kitchen drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. "My letters," she said. "The ones I wrote and never sent." I stared at it like it could cut. "Why are those here?" "Because I couldn't throw them away," she said. "And because you told me to hide them where you felt safe." "If Daniel finds those," she added, "he'll know everything." Fear makes you efficient. "Then we keep them hidden," I said, as if hiding a fire makes it go out. Marjorie's eyes hardened. Hide, rename, smooth it over. That's all you ever do. I leaned forward and offered her the same false piece I'd used for years. We can give Daniel an explanation that doesn't tear him apart. What explanation? I hesitated just long enough to feel ashamed. We tell him his father did something. Something we covered up. Marjorie's face drained. No. It's believable, I said. Frank isn't here to suffer. Marjorie's voice broke once. Daniel is. I watched her struggle with the old training, the part of her that still looked at me for permission. For the first time, she didn't lower her eyes. She said, quiet and exact, you always wanted the ending. You never cared what it did to the middle. The next day, Daniel came back, with his wife. Tessa sat beside Daniel on my couch like an anchor. She didn't waste time on politeness, and she didn't soften her questions to protect my pride. Daniel laid the papers out again. Explain it, he said. The corrections, the handwriting, Marjorie's name where it shouldn't be. He didn't say the word mother, but it filled the room anyway. I could have ended it. I didn't. Your father handled things, I said. He made decisions behind my back. He didn't want certain things in writing. Tessa's face sharpened. An affair? Daniel flinched at the word, but I saw relief in him, an explanation that didn't require him to rebuild his childhood from scratch. Relief is a dangerous thing. People mistake it for truth. And Marjorie, Tessa asked, why is she on these forms at all? She helped, I said. She stepped in when I couldn't. Daniel rubbed his forehead. So you covered for him, he murmured, as if naming it could contain it. I nodded and let him believe the ugliest version that still kept my hands clean. I watched it settle into him like bad medicine, painful but swallowable. Tessa looked at me with cold disgust, and for a moment I almost welcomed it. Disgust is simpler than what I deserved. When they stood to leave, Daniel paused at the doorway and looked back. If this is the truth, he said, then I'm done asking. I held his gaze and lied with my whole face. It's the truth, I said. They left with a contained story. For a brief moment, it worked. I even let myself imagine that the lie had survived again. After they left, I stood in my hallway, listening to their footsteps fade, and I let myself pretend the danger had passed. The house smelled like brewed tea and old paper. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, so I did what I always do when I'm afraid. I cleaned. I washed dishes that were already clean. I folded blankets and smoothed wrinkles that didn't matter. I opened the drawer with Marjorie's envelope and stared at it until my eyes ached. For a moment, I considered the simplest solution: fire. A match would have reduced decades of truth to ash. I held the envelope in my hands and felt how heavy it was for something made of paper. Marjorie's handwriting pressed through the pages like raised scars. I imagined Daniel reading them and hearing a voice he should have heard first. I imagined him looking at me the way he'd looked at the documents, but colder, because now it wouldn't be ink that betrayed me. It would be love. I put the envelope back. I told myself I was sparing him pain. That was my favorite excuse. Then my phone buzzed with a message from Daniel, a photograph of the birth certificate, zoomed in tight on the same spot he'd tapped earlier. A small detail circled in red. No words, just the image. Proof that he hadn't swallowed my story, only paused his teeth on it. I stared at that picture until my screen went dark. I could almost feel him on the other end, not yelling, not begging, just watching to see whether I would finally do the one thing I'd avoided all his life. I didn't. I waited for the lie to save me again. That night Marjorie called me. What did you tell him? Something he can survive, I said. You mean something you can survive, she replied. 2 mornings later, Lily asked her father why he didn't look like anyone in the family. The false piece cracked. Daniel arrived again, and this time he brought Lily. He didn't remove his coat. He didn't soften his voice. He looked like a man who had tried to live inside my story and found it too tight to breathe. "I talked to Marjorie," he said. "What did she say?" I asked, though my mouth was dry. "She cried," he said, and that single word told me the truth was already burning its way out. "She asked if I remembered a lullaby," he went on. "She knew every word, even the mistake." Lily's voice cut in, sharp. "Grandma, why does Aunt Marjorie look at Dad like she's scared he'll disappear?" Daniel didn't look away from me. "And I remembered calling you Evelyn when I was little." My heart tightened. "I fell," he said. "I cried. Marjorie grabbed me first, and I said, 'Don't tell Evelyn.'" Lily's face shifted, confusion turning into alarm. "Kids don't invent that," Daniel said. "They repeat it." He took one step closer. "Tell me the truth." I tried to regain control. "Not in front of Lily." "It's about my dad," Lily snapped. "So it is in front of me." Daniel's voice cracked on the question. "Am I your son?" I failed him again by answering around it. "You were my son in every way that mattered." "That's not what I asked," he said, and his eyes went wet. The stone in my throat finally moved, not from courage, from exhaustion. "No," I said, "not by blood." Silence thickened. "Then whose am I?" he asked. I kept my eyes on his. "You were Marjorie's," I said. "She is your mother." Daniel shook his head once, hard, refusing. "No." "She was young," I said. "Not married. It was unacceptable. We decided you would be mine. Frank agreed because he wanted the family to look clean." Daniel's mouth tightened. "You decided who my mother was." "Yes," I said. "I decided." His hands trembled. "Why did she let you?" "Because I was older," I said. "Because I was louder. Because I promised she'd still have you. Because I told her she should be grateful." His voice dropped. "And you were grateful?" The truth was small and ugly. "No." Daniel stared at me for a long time, like he was waiting for me to add a justification that could rescue me. When I didn't, something in him hardened into a quiet finality. Then he asked, suddenly, "Does she have letters?" My stomach dropped. "Yes," I said. "They're here." He nodded once. "Then we're going to her house," he said, "and you're going to watch me read them." That was the first consequence I couldn't negotiate. Marjorie opened her door and saw both of us. Something in her face broke before she spoke. She said Daniel's name the way a mother does when she's afraid her child might vanish. Daniel walked into her living room like a man entering his own past. He didn't hug her. Not yet. His eyes moved over the room, searching for proof that she had existed all those years beyond the role I assigned her. "The letters," he said. Marjorie brought the envelope from a drawer with shaking hands. When Daniel took it, the paper rustled like dry leaves. He read one letter, then sat down hard. He read another and covered his face. The words weren't dramatic. They were simple, a young woman writing love into the only place she was allowed to put it, paper. She wrote about ordinary things, a fever, a first step, a new tooth, the kind of details that make a mother real. Marjorie cried silently across from him, not reaching out, still trained to be careful, still trained to keep her love from looking like a claim. That training was my work. Daniel looked up at her. "You were there," he said. "All the time." "Yes," Marjorie whispered. "Why didn't you take me and run?" Marjorie glanced at me, then back at him. "Because I had nowhere," she said. "Because our mother would have disowned me. Because Evelyn promised you'd be safer with a clean name. And because part of me believed her." Daniel's gaze cut to me. No heat, just verdict. Marjorie's voice shook. I loved you enough to accept crumbs if crumbs meant I could still be near you." Daniel stood and pulled her into him. No politeness, no distance. Marjorie sobbed into his shoulder like she had been waiting for permission for a lifetime. I stood in the corner and felt something deeper than guilt. I felt small. Before Daniel left, he looked at me and said, "You don't get to be the only one who tells this story anymore." He was right. So here's my part, clean and ugly. I helped rewrite motherhood to avoid shame. I called it protection. I used it as power. I let my sister raise her own child from the shadows while I wore the title in the light. If you want a final lesson from an old woman, it's this. You can steal years with a lie, but the lie will come back and demand its debt. And if you think this is my only confession, you don't know what else I hid.